Yo, it's Ryan with Hunt Vision. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope to give you a return on it. Let's get it. Guys, welcome to another episode of the Hunt Vision podcast. Today we have on our very first guest, Blake Wollerman, also known as the Whitetail Killer. What's up, Blake?
What's up, dude?
Good,
How are you? Not too bad.
So yeah, how's it feel to be the first guest?
Feel honored. Feel special. You're starting off on the wrong foot.
Well, I couldn't think of anyone better to talk about whitetails, and heading into November, should definitely be a good conversation.
Yeah, it'd be a little better if we got some good weather around here. It's 85 degrees today.
That's pretty wild because out here in Colorado, we've got a 30-degree mornings, 30-degree afternoons, and like highs of 45-ish during the day. But it looks, I believe, a rainstorm is about to hit the Midwest and bring in some cold weather. I'm leaving for Missouri in a few days, and that is the case in Missouri. So I'm sure the Midwest is all about the same.
Yeah, it looks like there's a big cold front coming in this weekend. I mean, I think on Monday it's going to go from 75 degrees down to like 51 for a high. So that's perfect timing for a 1st of November cold
So where
front.
are you going to be sitting right when that hits?
Good question. Yeah, I don't know yet. We'll have to see what the wind does and see what kind of intel we get between now and then.
Cool. So tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you get started whitetail hunting? Where do you live? What do you do?
Yeah, so my name's Blake Wollerman. I live in Southern Illinois, and I work in the outdoor industry and digital media for a living. So I travel a lot, get to hunt a lot, spend a lot of time behind the camera, and even more time in front of a computer. Try to hunt as much as I can. Any free time I get is spent in a tree. Um, I've been hunting whitetail specifically since I was old enough to walk around. My dad got me into whitetail hunting. He was a serious whitetail hunter, ever since before I was born. And my grandpa was a taxidermist, so it's just kind of something I've been around my whole life.
And your dad, he makes custom stick bows, longbows.
Yeah, yeah. So my dad used to be a serious compound hunter, and then when my brother and I have one older brother, whenever me and him got old enough to kind of, you know, learn a little bit and go on our own and old enough to bow hunt for ourselves, my dad would rather see us kill a deer than him kill a deer. So he was just hunting and he would pass deer and then take me or Logan in there to try to kill it. And he got to the point where he was like, well, I'm not, he's like, I'm not even hunting for myself anymore. I'm hunting for you guys. And so he started shooting just traditional bows and hunted with that a little bit. And then he started making his own bows out of Osage trees, and that kind of turned into a bit of a passion for him. So, yeah, now he is strictly just a what's called a self bow hunter. So he hunts specifically with bows that he's made, and he's actually killed several deer with it, and he's still a better
Yeah,
hunter than I am.
that's insane. He killed, was it like a 170, 180 a couple years ago at like 10
Yeah, he
yards?
did kill. Yeah, he killed a 177, and then the next year he killed a 165.
And how did the broadheads work on that? Is he making his own broadheads as well?
No, so he'll shoot like glue on broadheads, like a grizzly or just a one piece 2 blade broadhead, and then his arrows are river cane, and then the fletchings are actually wings off of turkey feathers from turkeys that he's
That's
killed, and then
wild.
he'll take deer sinew, wrap the base of the feathers to the arrow, and glue the rest of it on. So yeah, he's
And
pretty
I'm sure
serious
he
about it.
has investigated making his own arrows as well.
Yeah, yeah. So that river cane, those arrows are actually like he'll go chop that river cane down, and then he'll make the arrows himself. He'll heat them and bend them to when they're straight, and then he'll put the feathers
So
on
now he just
himself.
has to find an arrowhead.
Yeah, now he just needs to start
That's
napping
insane.
rocks.
Yeah, so um yeah, I definitely get what you're saying as far as your dad and how he's kind of transitioned out of wanting to hunt for himself and getting more joy out of hunting with you guys or hunting for you guys. I definitely think there's like a path of hunter that a path that a lot of hunters go on. Most hunters really. When you're young, you're learning all the ropes. It's new to you. You're just excited to be out there, that type of thing. And then about our age in the 20s, I'd say, you just get super, I guess, bloodthirsty, where you just want to go on as many hunts as possible, kill as many things as possible, just experience everything. And then as you get older and maybe have a kid or someone else that you see picking up hunting, it kind of shifts more to happiness for them, hunting for them. That's the way my dad definitely transitioned. He definitely gets more excitement now out of taking a youth hunter every year or seeing me succeed than hunting himself. So I definitely think that's common in whitetail hunters and probably all hunters. Pretty common path there.
Yeah, and even like with my dad, I went from stepping on a stick, being a little kid, following him in the woods, and I'd make noise and I'd grit my teeth thinking, oh no, I'm about to get in trouble for stepping on a stick. And then now it's like I get a trail camera picture of a big deer, or, we're hunting a big deer, and it's like, you sure? I'll ask him, like, you sure you just don't want to go kill it? So even the roles there have kind of flipped to where, he doesn't hunt near as much and as serious as he used to, but I get just as much joy out of him shooting one than
Right.
myself.
Yeah, I definitely think that's pretty common. Um, so I don't think you got into it enough, but you are also a whitetail killer, not just your dad. Also, your brother. Your entire family is full of whitetail killers. But we're here today to talk a little bit about you. Um, so, um, I guess, what did you end up killing last year? You killed 2 deer last year, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I actually was one of them I killed on a farm for up north in Illinois, on a farm with a guy I was filming, and then I killed a deer back here at home. Killed them both first week in November.
And you said, I think you mentioned to me one time, the deer you shot last year was the first deer you've ever seen more than once in person and haven't killed.
Yeah, so I shot that deer in the shoulder on October. I think it was October 27th. I shot him in the shoulder and obviously didn't kill him. That was the first deer I ever shot and didn't
Oh
find.
man.
Knock on wood. Um, so yeah, I shot him. And then I ended up seeing him again the like the 3rd or 4th of November, and then I ended up killing him on the 10th. And that was, I don't. It's just one of those things where usually if I see a deer, I usually get a kill within one or two encounters with it. But
And
yeah, it was the third encounter with him, which it should have been the
right.
first if I would have capitalized my opportunity. But
Did he have a limp when you ended up killing him?
no, he didn't actually. I hit him super high. It was like almost no man's land above the shoulder. And he was chasing a doe when I killed him, and he was perfectly fine. It was like you could obviously tell where I shot him. He had a little bit of an infection there, but it had only been two
Right.
weeks. So, but yeah, he was
And I
fairly
think,
healthy.
yeah, there's definitely an advantage there heading into the rut. They quickly forget about any kind of injury whatsoever.
Yeah, most definitely. Test levels get high, and then that's the last thing on their mind. I mean, they're a lot tougher animals than people give them credit
So you
for, too.
killed both of them in the same week last year?
Yeah, I killed the first one. I think it was November 6th, and then killed him on the
That's
10th.
awesome. Is that what you would say is your favorite time, that first week of November?
Oh man, I
Very loaded
depends.
question.
Very loaded question. For me personally, I usually have one or two specific deer that I want to kill. So it's either I'm going to kill one of these two deer, or I'm not going to kill anything.
Right.
And the further into November that it gets, the harder it is to target a specific deer. So for me, I'll take a late October, first couple days of November. If you get the right weather, I would rather hunt, from the 25th to 3rd or 4th of November, if you get the right weather in there and you're trying to kill a specific deer, that's my favorite time of year to hunt. Can you still kill them in, mid late November? Absolutely, but they pick up a few does and they get on the trail of a hot doe and they may end up 2 miles away. You never know. So just with the way I hunt, trying to kill a specific deer, then I would rather have, a late October cold front, early November. But now if I was just hunting in general, if I was like, okay, I don't know what's on this farm, I'm just going to go sit on this farm and try to kill a deer, then I would rather have the second week in November.
Right, because then anything can show up from anywhere.
Yeah, they're just, you never know what's going to show up. They're more active, and you could have a deer from 2 miles away just come walking by that you've never seen before.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. So how do you how do you make your hit list every year? Just based on trail camera photos in the summer, driving around, just deer you know from the past that are likely to show up come October 1?
Yeah, so most of the time it's a combination of all those things. Usually it's deer that I have history with, that I know I've had trail camera pictures I've seen before. I see in the summer. I spend a lot of time driving around. Like the area I'm from, there's not a lot of secluded fields around here. So, during June, July, August, even into September, you can see deer from the road fairly easy. So I spend a lot of time driving around on the roads, and that's how I find a majority of the deer. Obviously, trail cameras too are a huge part, but most of the time it's deer that I know from the previous year, and I build that hit list based off of age. Like last year, I was like, okay, this deer's 4 years old. Next year he'll be 5. I'll probably try to hunt him. So that's usually my strategy for how I find those deer. I usually have a pretty good idea. Like right now, I have a fairly good idea of what deer that I'll hunt
Right.
next year, even.
Yeah.
Obviously, those deer can disappear and new deer can show up, and you never know. But usually, we'll have one or two deer that surprise us every year and either grow a lot or show up. And then, obviously, deer are going to get killed, new deer will move in. So you just never really know. But a majority of the time, it's deer from the previous
So
year.
what are your thoughts on aging deer? How accurate do you think you can be just from trail cam pictures, seeing them one or two times in the field? Do you think you're always within a year,
That lose you.
or do you think you could very well sometimes be 2 or 3, 4 years off? Like if it's an aged out,
You
past his prime buck, lost his mass, maybe sagging some on the weight side. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've got permission to hunt farms before where I've gotten pictures of big deer that I'm like, gosh, this deer looks like it's 3 years old. And, you just find out from the neighbors or other people that it's a 7 or 8 year old deer, but it just has a small
Right.
rundown body. It's a big rack deer, that just has a small body, and then sometimes you'll have 3 year old deer that look like they're 5 or 6 because their body's so big. So, if you don't know the deer, obviously, I can get a pretty good gauge based off the body on most deer, the sway in their back, their belly, their nose, just the normal, just what you look for. You can get a pretty good idea, but yeah, you never know exactly unless you know that deer from previous years.
I think from my experience, like 2.5's pretty easy, pretty simple. 3.5,
Yeah.
if they've blown up and have some score to them, they could look 4.5, but 3.5's usually kinda easy, and then 4.5 on, I think I'm always I'd like to think I'm always within a year, but, like, the difference between a 4.5 and a 5-year-old, it's huge. That could be a whole 'nother year, that could be a whole 'nother 50-inch jump.
Yeah, I mean, I typically see the biggest growth around here between 3 or 4 or 4 and 5, and there's some deer that don't grow between 3 and 4, and there's some deer that do grow between 3 and 4 and make a big jump, and vice versa with 4 and 5. But yeah, I mean, you could also have a deer. You'd have a 4 year old and a 5 year old in the same field, and the 5 year old may look
Right.
younger than the 4 year old, and the 4 year old may look older than the 5 year old. You just never know unless you know the deer, but most of the time you can get a pretty accurate gauge. And, sometimes deer just have bigger bodies and sometimes they just have smaller bodies. I mean, one of the deer I'm hunting right now is 5, and, he looks like a 3 year old on the hoof. Like he's not a big body deer. He never has been. Obviously he'll swell up a little bit come November, but he's just never been a big dominant
Right.
body deer.
Yeah, I mean, a dilemma that I think a lot of, if you're hunting like some private farms or land you own, or some big pieces of public, like a dilemma we go through every year is, oh shoot, he scores 130 to 150, but he looks old. Is he old, or if we kill him, are we killing what could potentially be a 170, 180? That is our dilemma every single year. There's usually, 2 to 4 bucks every single year that we just have to make that decision on. Sometimes we're right and sometimes we're wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not an easy call to make when you don't know the deer, you know? I mean, sometimes you get pictures of them, you're like, "Oh, I can tell that deer is, 5 or 6," or sometimes even older, and sometimes you get deer that are 3 that look 5 and deer that are 5 that look 3 and you don't shoot, you know? That's just a when you don't know the deer, it's just a tough call to make most of the
And
time.
then, like, growing up, I always thought that weight had a ton to do with it. But like, if you kill a deer November 20th, they're probably not going to have a ton of weight to them because they've been running around for a month. So
Yeah.
that was my perception early on, but uh, I don't think weight has as much to do with it.
Yeah, especially the later into the season you go. I mean, one of the biggest bodied deer that I've ever killed, when I killed him, he weighed 165 pounds. I mean, he
Right.
looked like a doe because he was so run down. I killed him the first week of December and, he'd just been run ragged. But, the second week in November, he looked like a Brahma bull. And then he just ran it all out of his system. And he was, half the size when I killed him than he was, when he was running around on the hoof in
Right.
November.
Um, so let's say you're scouting in the summer, and I think this was a year that this might have happened to you just by talking to you. You don't have any hit listers come the season opener. Um, how are you hunting? Are you still getting out in the woods to just hunt, or are you kind of sitting back? Are you sitting observation sits? Are you doing doe management? How are you handling that early season? Whether you do or don't have hit listers, are you moving in on those hit listers if you do have them?
Yeah, so if I don't have hit listers, which a lot of times I won't, during the first couple weeks in November, like usually around this time, especially on my home farm, like it's usually mid late October before I have a deer move in here that's mature. But if I don't have a hit lister during the early season, like we need to kill a lot of does on this farm. So we'll do some doe management and then, I'll do observation sits, places that are easy to get in and out of that you're not going to mess anything up and, kind of just sit back and wait and see if something shows up. But if I do have hit listers, to start the season, I'll still have the same approach, it's all going to depend on the weather. If it's hot and there's no cold front coming and there's not cool temperatures and I don't have a deer daylighting consistently, then, I'll do some doe management or do some observation sits. But if I have a hit lister at the start of the season, a buck I want to kill, and I get a good cold front, a good temperature drop, or the wind changes from south to north and it drops 15 degrees, and that deer is, I have a decent idea of what he's doing, and I think I can kill him when that cold front comes because he's going to daylight. It's just a matter of where. And if I think I can kill him, then I'll move in and try to kill him. But I'm not going to go busting into the timber into a prime bedding area on October 3rd to try to
Right.
kill a deer. It's going to be on a food source. So,
Yeah, it's tough because you wait, what, 7 to 9 months every year for whitetail season to come around again, and you're getting a few pictures of a good deer. It's tough to kind of hold back and make sure you know he's daylighting, you know his patterns, that type of stuff. Because I mean, if it's a mature buck, you might only get one or two chances, usually just one.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's really bad when you have one that's real close to daylight and you're like, well, maybe I'll just get lucky if I go in there and
Maybe the
he'll
camera's
daylight the
not
day that I
picking him
go in
up.
there. But yeah, and then you end up doing more harm than good because he's on his way to the field when you climb out, and then you blow out the
Right,
field, and you just messed up that whole entire area and did more harm than good just because you were dying to get out there.
right. Um, So, with the scouting part of what you were kind of talking about there with trail cam pictures and everything, Are you using cell cams now? Are you still traditional? What are your thoughts on cell cams? Are the, I mean, I think they're an insanely useful tool. You don't have to mess things up, but can still, I guess, be out in the field at the same time. But I don't think technology has caught up to where they're not like they're super finicky still. Are you utilizing them?
Yeah, for sure. I'm about half and half right now, half cell cams, half not, and maybe even a little heavier on the traditional trail camera side. And the reason for that is like just like what you said, I've had too many experiences where I've had mature deer that have just been too finicky of them. I don't know if there's any reason behind that, and I also think that sometimes cell cams will miss pictures of deer. That's just my personal
We're getting a
experience. I
lot
don't
of
know,
blurry pictures this
if
year.
yeah, I get a lot of blurry pictures too. I mean, I don't think their technology is as caught up as, to some of these other traditional cameras. I use cell cameras mainly in two spots. I'll use them in places I don't want to go into that aren't easy to check. And then I'll use them on farms that I don't hunt a lot or farms that I don't have a deer that I want to kill on just in case something does start to show up there, then and he does become killable, I can slip in and kill him versus having to go check a traditional camera and I go check it. It's been up for 2 weeks and 5 days in a row I had a deer daylighting and it's like, oh, I didn't know. But so that's usually my approach to cell cams, like, on field edges and places that are easy to get in and out of. I'll run traditional cameras, just got like picture quality better. I don't think they miss pictures, and I just have a better experience with them. So that's
It's
usually my
also not the
tactic
end of the
there.
world to just run by with a ranger, change the card, and run back. I like the way
Yeah,
you're using
yeah, for
those though,
sure.
because you as a hunter with the knowledge and skills you already have, or you know where you're hunting, you know the deer you're hunting, so you don't need as much intel in those areas. You don't have to mess it up with cell cams or I mean, I'm sure you have some cameras in there, but you don't have to mess it up as much and you still have trail cameras in spots that you're not as heavily set on just in case, November 15th, a shows up out of nowhere and you can hunt him. I like the way you're doing that there.
Yeah, like on a farm that I don't hunt a lot or I don't have a deer that I want to kill on there, I'll throw a cell cam up on a community scrape and something new does show up there that I want to kill, then I know instantly versus if I had a traditional camera, I may go check it and however long it takes me to get there, especially if it's in a tough location to get to. I really like to use them on scrapes in the woods if I can find them. So that way I don't have to go in there and check them all the time. And, I can keep an eye on them because if you get a deer that's in a scrape in the woods consistently, a lot of times you can
Right.
kill that deer. And I want to be able to know that versus tromping in there to go check a regular camera. And then I'm too late once I get there and check it. And he's been there for, 4 days in a row in the daylight.
Right. Yeah, and another problem we have with them, and I don't know if this is just the ones we're using, but there's no if they don't send you photos that they took or came out blurry, there's no database or application to go back and just see all of the photos that camera took in general. Um, but yeah, obviously, with all of the problems with them, you can still just sit on your living room couch and know that there's a buck hitting that scrape.
Yeah. And, most of the time, I know my farm's good enough to know that like I use trail cameras more for intel of what deer I have than how I'm going to kill a deer. I know my farm's good enough, especially during the rut with travel corridors and funnels that if I get a picture of a deer somewhere, I usually have a pretty good idea of where I can kill that deer. Now, obviously on like a food source, like yeah, you're going to get deer that are daylighting and not daylighting that you can slip in and kill, and a trail camera is the only way that's going to tell you that unless you
Right.
obviously hunt it. But I use them more for intel of what deer are there versus like, oh, I need to go kill this deer because he's on
Right.
camera.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach to it because just because he's hitting that specific trail on that camera doesn't mean he's going to continue to do that at that time every day. If you know there's food or bedding close by, or a scrape line nearby, or whatever, then if you know he's hitting the camera or trail, then you know when and where to sit based on bedding, scrape lines, food, that type of thing. Definitely have to be a skilled hunter and can't just show up because there's a buck on camera.
Yeah, and then, you have the guys that have, fortunately for me, like, all of my farms are, the farthest farm I have is 15 minutes away, to where a guy like you that lives out west that has a farm in Illinois, cell cams are a lot more useful for you because if you have a deer showing up in daylight, then, you can come kill it to where, I don't have to do that. I don't have to travel to go anywhere. And you get guys that hunt public and guys that have farms in other states and, even farms that are an hour or two away, like if I had a farm that was 3 hours away, like I'm probably just going to strictly run
Right.
cell cams on it because you're going to have to make that decision, at the drop of a hat. Oh, I have a cold front coming, and first day of a cold front of deer daylight, it's like I'm going to go try to kill him tomorrow. And without a cell cam, people don't know that. So I think they have their pros and they have their cons for sure.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're doing. I'm about to leave for Missouri, and we've been looking at the weather. We've been looking at the cell cams, and there's a lot of bucks that are just right after dark. And I think there's a big rainstorm coming. Temperature's supposed to drop 20 to 25 degrees. I'm hoping that's what gets them the daylight. But if you have cell cams, maybe you wait until it daylights a day, or you bet on yourself and the weather, and you could mess it up or it could work out. But yeah, that's definitely what we're doing about to do in Missouri. Waiting on that cold front and those bucks that are about to daylight, but not quite yet.
Yeah, especially when you have a cold front coming in. Like, I mean, regardless of what I have on camera, if I have a cold front, I'm gonna be in a tree somewhere if I can. Obviously that doesn't always work with work and life, but if I could find a way to be in a tree with a cold front, I'm definitely going to, regardless of what I have
Yeah,
on
actually,
camera.
most of the country had a big October cold front this year, and there were a lot of bucks killed. How was that for you?
Yeah, it was good around here too. I didn't have a deer that I wanted to kill show up yet, so I just did some doe management and I had a few observations. But like overall movement was, a typical cold front. I mean, it was good. Deer were on their feet for sure, and there was a lot of people killing a lot of big deer. And I was a little jealous of the people that had a bunch of big deer showing up because I was like, well, hopefully something shows up for
Right.
me.
What were the deer doing right when that cold front hit? Just hitting food as hard as it could?
Yeah, we had a pretty good acorn crop this year, so a lot of them were hitting acorns. A lot of them were staying in the timber. Beans were starting to turn yellow around here if they hadn't already. So acorns were pretty heavy. Farmers were starting to shell corn, and so you had some shelled cornfields. But yeah, it was a lot of acorns.
Nice. Um, and then you kind of touched on it earlier, how if you have a buck that you have patterned, you want to get on them last week of October, first week of November before they change. And we were you got a deer right now that you're trying to, locate and pattern before he changes his patterns. I guess, are you super aggressive before they start rutting? Are How scared are you that that deer will just disappear as soon as the rut starts? What are your yeah, what's your approach there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always scared that that deer is going to just disappear come right. He may find his first doe and be 5 miles away. You never know. So if I can try to get him killed before I even have to take that chance, and then I'm going to. Like Monday we have that big cold front coming in, so the deer that I'm hunting right now is I don't have to be super aggressive for him. He's coming to a food plot fairly consistently. It's just all at night. We have had a few cold fronts that he's daylighted in that I wasn't able to hunt or the wind was wrong. But yeah, I don't have to be super aggressive for him just because of his pattern. But if I could be aggressive on him, I would. If I have a deer that's fairly killable and I need to try to make an aggressive move, if I know where that deer is bedding or I know how that deer is getting from bed to food, and I think I can kill him, whether it be on morning or an evening, and it's somewhere that I haven't been all year, then I'll push into the timber to try to
Right.
kill that deer.
And then yeah, if you do go aggressive, I also I've heard you talk about you had a stretch where you hunted 87 days in a row. Um, so
Yeah.
how do you manage that pressure? Because if you're going aggressive on a buck, you know you could screw it up on one or two hunts and then never see that deer again. But at the same time you're also hunting 87 days in a row sometimes. How do you manage that?
Yeah, yeah, so it was I think it was 87 or 88 days in a row. I mean, it was, pretty much from the start of season till the end of season, I hunted almost every day. A lot of that wasn't for a specific deer. A lot of those were just observation sits and, hunting other farms and stuff. But if I do have a deer that I'm gonna make an aggressive move on, like I still want that spot that I'm going to be accessible, and I want it to be have good access and be able to leave that spot without, whether I'm hunting a field edge, like last night, for example, I hunted a field edge, and to get in and out of that spot, I just dropped straight down a cliff into the creek. I walk the creek. The stand is right on the edge of the field, right on the edge of the creek bank. I crawl up the creek bank into the tree. There was deer in the field when I got down. They were out in the field. I just dropped straight down out of that tree, got in the creek, and I was gone. So just finding places that have good access to get in and out of to where you're not messing that up is important, because I'm not just gonna, go walking into that deer's bedding area and find a random tree like, oh, I think I can kill that deer here, and then, blow out the whole country whenever I leave or whenever I walk in there in the morning. So I'm still smart about it, but I'm still I would consider myself an aggressive
Right.
hunter.
Yeah, just yeah, I guess yeah, I don't know what the word would be there, but patient but aggressive at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm aggressive, but I'm still
And
smart.
I like that approach because I think a lot of people that are hunting after big bucks, like one or two specific deer, they kind of lose that love to just go out in the woods and deer hunt because, you know, they can't hunt and besides the one or two times the wind is right for their specific deer. I think, yeah, I definitely see it in the hardcore big buck hunters that you know chase one or two deer that you can tell they've kind of lost just the love to sit in the woods. So it's pretty cool that you're still, you know, still just going to sit in the woods, doing observation sits, shooting does, and then hammering that first good condition day.
Yeah, and I mean, I have enough places and farms to go to, and places that are easy to get in and out of. That even if the weather's bad and I have the opportunity to go sit in a tree, like I'm gonna go sit in a tree. You know, like today was 85 degrees, and if I would have had the opportunity to hunt tonight, like I would have went and hunted tonight. Am I gonna make an aggressive move on a buck? Absolutely not. But I'm gonna go sit in a tree on the edge of a field somewhere that's easy to get in and out of, just so that way I can sit in a tree. Because every opportunity I get to sit in a tree, I'm gonna be in a
Right.
tree.
And you've also had a ton of success late season. You hunt a lot of cut cornfields, cut bean fields late season. Are you hunting in the timber at all? You still hunting mornings?
Yeah, so my main late season approach is, it's all about food, and during the summer we spend a lot of time planting food plots, whether it be corn, beans, or green plots. I've had the best success with corn. Standing beans are great too, but something about corn around here. I've watched deer walk through standing bean fields to get to corn, so usually my strategy in late season is corn. Um, like we have a spot we planted beans. We have other farms we planted corn on, but I like corn a lot better than I do beans. And usually my strategy for late season is, I'll still hunt mornings if I know like where the deer I want to kill is bedding, and if I can get in there, with all the leaves off the trees and how open it is. A lot of times they don't bed far off from the food, so a lot of times trying to get into a spot in the mornings during late season can be difficult. But if you get this a spot that has good access that you can get into of a morning, you can kill those deer of a morning in late season. I know a lot of people don't hunt mornings late season, but I'm not afraid to if I have the right
So your
scenario.
timber strategy late season would be just to hug the bedding or pick a travel route to or from the bedding?
Yeah, I mean, I want to try to get as close to where that deer's bedding as possible, and a lot of times those deer won't go back to bed until daylight. And if you can be somewhere close to where he's bedding, you have a really good chance of killing that deer. I mean, I've killed a few deer during late December in the morning, and you just get to where a spot that they going back to bed from food, it can be
Right, because 'cause they're
deadly.
probably gonna be feeding late afternoon into the night, so they're going to bed for the day.
Yeah, yeah, for
Um,
sure. Obviously your evenings are better, but if you have a good beat on that deer, then you can kill him. I mean, there's a lot of like the deer that I hunt, you know, I hunt a lot of small tracts of land. I don't have a bunch of giant farms to hunt. A lot of the places that I hunt are, 40, 50, 60 acre chunks and 80 here. And so a lot of the deer that I'm hunting, they don't bed on the farm that I can hunt. So I have no choice but to kill them on food. So, obviously I'm not going to go hunt a food source and, late season on to try to kill a buck in the
right.
morning.
So if you don't, you said you would hug bedding in the timber in the mornings. If you don't have a buck that you know for sure is hanging out or where they're bedding, are you scouting in the mornings? Are you scouting in the evenings until you find a deer, or you're just gonna go sit, big open sets to where you can see a lot of deer and until you find a buck?
Yeah, so if I don't have a deer late season, I'll I'll either let my trail cameras do the scouting for me because I can put them up on food sources and know what deer are coming there. And then I'll spend a lot of time driving around because I'll have a lot of new deer show
Right.
up late season, just because I have more food than anybody else does. So getting deer to show up here during late season is pretty normal. So I'll let my trail cameras tell me that if I don't have a deer to kill. I'll still hunt if I can, sit somewhere where I can see and somewhere that I can get in and out of without blowing that field out. Like I'll still do an observation sit just to see what I see because, you know, the trail cameras only tell you
Right.
part of the story. So trying to find a deer late season, spend a lot of time driving around and then a lot of time in a tree still too, but it's just in a safe spot.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, late season is one of my favorite times to hunt. And I definitely agree with the kind of new deer showing up. What we've seen in the past a lot is kind of like a shuffling of the herd. Our specific farm kind of gets hunted quite a bit during the gun seasons. So those bigger bucks could have gotten pushed out or killed. So the deer that we had October, November are either dead or pressured out, and then the deer from other farms, neighboring farms, were also shot at, pressured out, so they will come to us. So what we've seen a lot is kind of like that shuffling of the herd. And if you have food, that is essential because if those deer are moving, looking for a safe space, looking for a spot to recover, if they see a giant cut cornfield or bean field, that's easy, just an easy buffet along with bedding, then you're probably going to hold them for the rest of the season.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we were talking earlier about the deer that my dad killed with his self bow. And, that deer's a perfect example. We had zero trail camera photos of that deer until like after Christmas. Like that deer showed up, I think it was like December 29th, and he killed it like 2 or 3 days before the season ended. And, you know, I don't know where that deer came from. I don't know where he was during the summer. I don't know where he was during October. I don't know where he was during November. I don't know where he was during early December. No clue. I'd never seen the deer before. Nothing. Never seen him from the road. Knew nothing about him. I mean, he could have come from a mile away. He could have come from 10 miles
Right.
away. I don't know. And if we didn't have food, that would have never
And
happened.
you said corn's your favorite.
It is. Yeah.
Do you see a lot of success with corn early to middle of the season as well, or it's kind of a prepping for late season, waiting for it to be good?
Yeah. So I love corn year round. I think it depends on the deer too. Some deer, you know, that I've tried to kill will go to standing beans. Some will go to standing corn, but overall, I've had more success with corn, and I just think the herd overall likes corn better than they do beans. I don't know. I don't know if it's the protein or the palatability. I don't know what it is about it, but they just like corn
And you're
better.
hunting cut and standing. You're able to leave some standing.
Yeah. Yep.
Because some of our concerns is how quickly a cut cornfield will get wiped out. What's your experience with that? If you are hunting a cut cornfield late season, Are you expecting it to still have corn, December 15th, or are you worried about that?
Yeah, so for example, like right now, I hunted a cut cornfield last night, and that field is 25, 30 acres, and they cut it I think 3 or 4 days ago. And I have a really high deer population on this farm. There was 50 some deer out there last night. So like, I mean, that cornfield is going to run
Right.
dry pretty quickly. So our what we do with our corn plots is we fence them off in the summer, so that way they don't eat it before it gets tall enough. And then as the season progresses, like we'll move part of that fence back and then just leave it standing. And then only part of that field they can get in. So, when late season rolls around, we still have a corn plot that then we'll just pop the electric fence off and,
So
and leave it
they have
standing.
enough to keep them coming to eat throughout the entire year, and then you just open the gates late
Yep.
season. That's super smart.
Yep. Pretty much. Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's awesome. So 50 deer in one field. How many does are you
Yeah.
shooting a year, and what is your buck to doe ratio roughly, and what are you aiming for?
Yeah. I mean, my buck to doe ratio is not good. We're not shooting enough does a year, but you know, just between like me, my dad, and my brother, I mean, we can't keep up. We try to kill as many as we can, but I mean, there was just 55 deer out there last night, I think, and I mean, my buck to doe ratio is probably like 7 to 1. I mean, it's
Right.
it's not good. You know, 3 to 1 or even 2 to 1 is ideal, but on this farm is just we need to try to kill as many does as we can, and the deer population is just so out of control that it's tough to get that buck to doe ratio down, which it's good to have a bunch of does during November, but we're a
Yeah.
little over the
Well, it's
top.
a fine line because when do you do doe management? Obviously, the first couple weeks of October, but like this year, if you get a cold front hitting in October, you're not going to shoot a doe where you think you might have a big one coming, or you maybe you have a month to doe manage, and then after that, you're pretty focused on bucks from there to the end of the season, and then like late season, even you probably have a buck or two you're hoping shows up in the field. If you shoot a doe in that field, you kind of screw that up. But it's just a fine line, especially when there's
Yeah.
that many does. If it's 7 to 1 and over, that's super tough to keep up with if you also want to be hunting a deer hard.
Yeah, I mean, I usually try to in the early season, I'll shoot does in the mornings, and then, sometimes in the evenings, depending on the weather. And then late season, I'll do the same thing. I'll shoot does in the mornings, and then I'll shoot them in the evenings too on farms that I don't have a deer that I want to kill. But even just trying to keep up with the management is just it's nearly
And it's
impossible.
also a fine line because it's kind of fun seeing 50 deer when you go out on a hunt. Like,
Yeah, it is. People are, you tell people you've seen 50 deer, and they're like, "Oh, that's awesome." I'm like, "Well, it's not though. I needed to see
right.
30 deer."
And would you trade that for only seeing 8 to 10 deer, but having a higher chance of seeing a bigger deer? Or
Right. I mean, that's just a fine line that you have to walk. I mean, I would rather have too many deer than not enough deer. Especially during November, I would rather have too many does than no
right.
does. But yeah, it's still too
I
it's
guess there could
way too
also be
high.
some silver lining there. Um, the second rut, how many does still aren't bred because there hasn't been enough bucks. Do you get a longer rut because of that? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of new deer show up late November that I've never seen before. I killed a deer a few years ago that we had two trail camera photos of all year, and I killed him on I think it was November 24th. And where like I seen that deer during the summer, and where I seen him during the summer, and where he was during the season too for most of the year, to where I killed him was like 2.4 miles away. And if we didn't have a high doe population, that I probably never would have killed
Right.
that deer.
Yeah. The family farm I grew up hunting also has that problem. I bet we're higher than 7 to 1 as far as buck to doe ratio. And we'll kill, I mean, probably 15 does a year. and that's not even close to enough if you're trying to get the ratio down to 3 2 to 1. But yeah, there's pros and cons to both. You could have a longer rut or a more intense second rut, or the big bucks don't have to move at all because there's 10 does right in his bedding area.
Yeah, that's the problem.
So you said you hunt a lot of 40 to 80 acre tracts. How do you deal with the neighbors? Because 40 to 80 acres is
That
not typically enough to manage and pass deer and see them the next year.
Yeah, so, it's progressively gotten worse over the last few years. We've had, with the legalization of crossbows in Illinois now, and, just social media and just more people hunting, like it's gotten worse over the years. When I was younger, we could pass deer and be like, "Oh, I'm confident that I'll see that deer next year," to where now, it's like, "Oh, I'm going to pass this deer, and I don't know if he's going to make it next year." But with only wanting to kill mature deer, it's just the risk that you take. And there's farms that I have where the neighbors are great, and there's farms that I have that there's not a lot of neighbors, and then there's farms like my home farm that during gun season there's going to be 15 people hunting a 100-acre chunk
Gee,
around me. Deer walks through there, it,
yeah,
it stands no chance. That's another reason that I like to try to kill a deer, and I'll get aggressive before they start really chasing does. Is they go to the neighbors. I don't know if that deer's going to ever come back to me because he
right,
might be dead. So, it's a battle hunting, smaller chunks. I mean, the biggest chunk that I have to hunt is 170 acres. And, we don't have a chunk big enough to be able to hold deer on. But we can just do what we can to make sure that we give those deer every reason to be on us, whether that's TSI, food plots. None of my neighbors really plant food. So, us having food does a huge difference for us. um, and the worst thing about, like, especially my home farm, is my neighbor's bedding is way better than mine. So, a lot of the deer bed on the neighbor and come on to me. And, I mean, it's a constant battle that I have to fight every year of, is this deer going to live? Is this deer going to get shot? Like the deer I want to kill right now, like he might be dead right now. I don't know. The neighbor could have
right.
killed him tonight for all I know. It's just a constant battle with having to hunt smaller chunks.
So yeah, that's tough because it's. I mean, you never want to tell someone else how to enjoy hunting and stuff. It's just if you do have contradicting plans and methods of hunting, if you're after a 160-inch deer and they're just out there to shoot, you know, fill the freezer, then they might shoot, the 130-incher that you had up and coming. It's just tough because you certainly don't want to step on toes. They are well within their rights to hunt however they want, but at the same time, there's no
Yeah.
way for you to follow through with your plan if that's their plan is to fill the freezer, shoot smaller deer, that type of thing. It's definitely yeah, it's just it's I think the best way is to communicate with them. Just kind of figure out the
Yeah,
plan
for sure.
each
And
of you have, the deer you're seeing, that type of thing.
yeah, most definitely. And I'll never knock anybody for hunting legally. If you want to legally hunt with a crossbow, then by all means legally hunt with a crossbow. If you want to shoot a four pointer, shoot a four pointer. If you're my neighbor, do I
Yep.
want you to shoot a four pointer? Absolutely not. But I'll never knock somebody for legally wanting to be out there and how they hunt. Like for me, I don't want to kill a deer
Right.
unless it's mature, and I want all these deer to grow up and reach maturity. And I just don't have the ability to do that. All the deer that I'm hunting have to quote unquote slip through the cracks every year. And we have neighbors that have the same mindset as us, and then we have neighbors that have the opposite mindset of us, that'll shoot anything
Right.
that walks by. And it's just, it's always going to be a constant battle.
Yeah, I've definitely my mindset's changed on it a little bit because I am the neighbor that is filling their freezer and that type of thing out here in the West. If I see a deer, elk, antelope, whatever makes me excited, may not be a giant, I'm shooting. So I've definitely seen the light as far as growing up, we were whitetail managers trying to shoot big deer. Kind of grew frustrations with neighbors shooting smaller deer, that type of thing. Definitely seen the light and understand both sides completely. And if you bring kids into the equation, you want every single youth hunter that's going to have a good time and continue hunting, because obviously more hunters equals good for the entire community.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the first deer that I ever killed was a four pointer. And, I was like 6 years old. And I can guarantee you that 6 year old me shooting that four pointer was way more excited than any grown adult was shooting a 7 year old 200. I mean, out of all the deer I've ever killed, that's still the most excited I've ever been to shoot a deer. And I still remember that hunt like it was yesterday. So, especially when you get kids involved. I don't care what weapon those kids are hunting with. If you can get kids involved, that's
Yeah.
a win in my book. I'll gladly sacrifice a 2 year old 8 pointer or a 4 pointer for a
Right.
kid.
And the deer behind me that you see above my head is actually the first deer I shot. Lit I don't
Yeah.
know, 80-inch 8 pointer. And yeah, that was
Yep. I guarantee you were more excited than you were for almost anything
right.
else you've ever
And
shot.
that's a fine line as well, when you are attempting to kill big deer every year. Like, you and I kinda talk back and forth, like, what's he score? How old is he? That type of thing. It's it's a fine line between you're getting too much into the score, age, that type of thing, and it excites you, shoot it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm to the point now where, I don't want to shoot a deer
Right,
unless it's mature. But 5, 6 years ago, when I was a 14-year-old kid and I was bow hunting for myself, I had a decent idea of how to, age a deer, but a deer walked by me that, made my heart jump out of my chest. I
right,
was going to shoot it, whether it was a 130-inch 3 year old or a 160-inch 5 year old, like I was going to shoot it, and I think we get too caught up in score and, all that stuff nowadays. And, if you like it, shoot it. If it makes you nervous and you're happy with it, let
right.
it rip.
Yeah, it's definitely a fine line, because you obviously have to pass big deer to shoot super big deer. So if
Yep.
you're committing to, the ultimate big buck hunter kind of lifestyle or hunting method, then you have to accept the fact that you will pass things that do excite you sometimes. So it's definitely a fine line. You got to have that battle with yourself, wrestle with yourself, figure out why you're doing it, and what you want out of the hunt. But I think everyone kind of goes through that.
Yeah, and like we talked earlier about like my dad hunting with a self bow. He built one for me a couple of years ago, and I shot a doe with it. I've never killed a buck with one yet, and you know your max range for one of those bows is like maybe 20 yards. For me, it's like 18 is like I don't want to shoot past 18 yards, and when I'm hunting with that bow, I've had deer where I haven't had my compound in the tree. I've had bucks walk by at 40 that I wouldn't shoot with my compound that have made me nervous just because I know I have to get that much closer to that deer to be able to kill it. And, I would rather shoot a mature 130-inch deer with that bow at 15 yards than a mature 150 at 50 yards with my
Right.
compound. It's just a way bigger of an accomplishment. And, the feeling that I'm going to get from that is going to be way better. Does it score as much? No. But do I
Right.
care? Absolutely not.
Yeah, and it's also like some people's, like one of our friends that lives in Michigan, he was saying, 120-inch, I think, is a super big deer for his area. Excites him a ton. That's awesome. So some people are kind of limited on their age class and area. If you're hunting Iowa, then you're probably going to get caught up in the big buck hunter lifestyle, passing 150-inch 4 year olds so that they could possibly become 180 plus. Yeah, and it's about I'm sure after you kill a few 150s, then like in your case, it sounds like you're only after big deer, because the other ones just don't excite you.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, it's more about age and score anyway. And I work in social media every day, so this is kind of contradicting. But as bad as it sounds, social media has kind of ruined hunting. Like, for me, you know, people have a stigma that I only kill big deer and all I care about is
Right.
score. And I could kill a 7-year old 125 that I have 6 sheds off of that I've watched grow for however many years, and people are gonna be like, "Oh, wow, Wallerman killed a dink." And, I would get more accomplishment out of killing that deer than killing a random
Right.
150 that walked by,
Especially
you
if it's a
know?
deer you've hunted
So, I think
three
people just
years in
get
a row and couldn't connect on or that type of thing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, and I think people just get too caught up in score. I mean, obviously, yeah, like, I would love to kill a 200-inch deer every year, but that's just not realistic, and you know, I don't have the ability around here, like we talked about earlier, all my neighbors shoot, anything that walks by. So I don't have enough mature deer around here to be like, I'm not going to shoot
Right.
this mature buck. You know, am I going to shoot a mature 120? Probably not. But am I going to shoot a mature 150? Yes, 9 times out of 10, I am. There might be a year where I'll have bigger deer to hunt that I can pass those deer. But, most of the time, a deer reaches 5 or 6 for me, it's going to get killed.
Right. Yeah, on that social media topic, I think people, when you're scrolling Instagram, it's kind of, you fail to realize that you just scrolled past 30 people that maybe have been hunting 20 days in a row, finally connected, or that's the first buck they killed in 4 years, but you just saw the highlight of 30 people in a row all killing a 150 plus. So it's super easy to get discouraged while you're sitting in a stand, not seeing anything or not killing
Yeah, most
anything. You just scrolled by thirty people's highlights of the year, and some of them biggest buck of their life. So it's super
Yeah,
good.
I mean, yeah, that's all social media is a highlight. I mean, you know, people probably look at my social media and think, "Oh, wow, Blake kills big deer every year," and it's like they don't realize they don't know near the amount of work that goes into it. I don't have giant deer just running around everywhere. Like I don't have giant farms that I can just go hunt and be like, "Oh, I'm gonna go kill this deer." I don't have that, so I have to the biggest deer I've ever killed was on an 80-acre chunk, and 76 acres of that 80
Oh
is tillable.
man,
There's only 4 acres of huntable ground on there,
was he
and,
in that, or you
you
caught him
know, I
traveling?
yeah, it's just a fence row and a little block of timber and a little finger of timber, and he was coming down that fence row, and that's just the kind of places that I have to hunt, so I don't have these giant blocks of timber that, these deer are bedding on me, eating on me, and traveling on me. I don't have that, you know, for me, like, it's hard to kill deer here, and, social media probably doesn't give that
Well, you're
perspective.
just known as the big buck killer because you end up killing big bucks every year. But I mean,
I guess that's a
me
great
from
problem to
knowing you,
have.
I don't know how well everyone else knows you that knows you knows just how much you put in, but you're like from what you're doing in the summer, you're riding roads just about every night, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm I was a kid that, I went to college 2 hours away, and I was there for 2 years, and I never one time stayed a single weekend over there. Every weekend I was driving 2 hours home, and I was doing something involving deer. Whether that was just to get out of the city and come home and drive around and look for deer, or, hanging cameras in the summer, and then obviously during season I was hunting every weekend and, skipping class probably more than I should to come home, and so yeah, there's a lot of work that
Yeah, I
goes
mean,
into it.
like when I kind of realized how much you were driving roads in the summer and trying to pattern bucks already, it just when I was growing up, I didn't do a ton of that, and it just kind of put in perspective, like, wow, I'm really not doing the work. And then yeah, like the running trail cameras, you're doing hanging hunts, based on what you're finding during the season. You're hunting 87 days in a row, that type of thing. Don't see any of that on social media.
No, you don't. I mean, like the year that that I hunted that many days was, I was in college, and that was during COVID, so we got sent home from school, and obviously you couldn't work anywhere. Everything was shut down, so I had the ability to hunt every day, and at the end of the season, I killed a big deer, and all people see is, oh, you killed a big deer. They don't see that getting up at 4 a.m. for that many days in a row, and I'm so sleep deprived, I don't even know what day of the week it is, and, I can't complain because I got to hunt
Right.
that much, but still, it takes a toll on you
That 4
physically and
a.m.
mentally,
alarm after
you
a
know?
week of windburn on your face is tough.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, that I was hanging and hunting one morning for that deer in December. It was, like, mid-December, I was hanging and hunting, and the wind chill was, like, -12, and I had seen him go back to bed the night before, and I hang and hunted in there the following morning, and it was, like, so cold that, I don't like to wear gloves, and, I had gloves on that had the fingers out of them, like, my fingers were sticking to the metal on my sticks because it
Oh,
was so cold, and, you know, it's just one of those things
how
where
am I
you're
gonna
like,
grab
"What
my
am I
bow when
doing?"
it comes down to it? Shake the frost
Yeah.
off the strings when
Yeah,
you draw back.
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of an I had it with waterfowl too, with some buddies from Missouri, just like, wow, I have not been putting in I don't put near enough work in. It's easy to see Blake killed a big one on social media or they kill the limit, but the 87 days in a row, the
Yeah.
scouting in the summer, all of the time on electronic maps, um, all that shooting your bow, getting set up, get yeah, all of that comes down to that one picture on social media that everyone sees.
Yeah, they see you sitting behind a deer and they think, "Oh, wow, Blake went out and sat in a tree and
Right.
killed another big deer." And
They
it's
just
like,
expect you to do
"Did he
it.
though?" Yeah. And it's like they don't realize, I don't have a social life, I'm not a big social guy. I don't go out and party, I don't hang out with a bunch of people. Like my Friday nights and my weekends are spent trying to find and kill deer. And you just don't see that on
Right.
social media, and I don't care
Right.
if people see that.
Yeah, that's something I've kind of learned as I've um started hunting more on my own, getting older, that type of thing. Is just if you want to be successful at any type of hunting, it has to be a lifestyle. If you want consistent success, it has to be a lifestyle. There's no way around it. Whether you're hunting public land, private land, outfitting, you have to know the ins and outs of all your gear. You have to know the logistics of where you're going and how you're getting there. The animal that you're hunting, their movements, their behaviors, everything. Like it just has to be a lifestyle 24/7.
Yeah, it's the same way with waterfowl. It's the same way with elk hunting. I'm not a big waterfowl guy, but there's guys around here, that hunt public that they're hiking, dragging their decoys
I
miles
live
in
that
every day,
life.
and it's they have oh yeah, they kill a 5-man limit of greenheads, and people see it on social media, and they don't know that they hunted 15 days in a row before that and didn't kill a duck, but they were still hiking 3 miles back into public land, dragging their
Right.
decoys out, and you just don't see that.
So, I have kind of a loaded question here. What do you
Oh boy.
believe separates bad to average slash good to great whitetail hunters?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is it comes down to the pressure that you're putting on your deer. It doesn't matter how much work you do, how much food you have, how many trail cameras you've ran, how well you know a deer. If you blow, that deer out of that area, that's the biggest mistake you can make as a whitetail hunter. And I think people do that too often. They get, too caught up in wanting to be in a tree and wanting to go hunt and wanting to go shoot this deer that, they're blowing the field out every night, and they're hunting on days where it's 85 degrees, or they're hunting on days where the wind's wrong. And I think that's, I don't want to call anybody a quote unquote bad hunter, but to not be as
No,
successful,
I
that's
think
what
bad
you
hunter
need to
is
do.
definitely a term that should be associated. I mean, like when we're younger,
Yeah.
you just go sit in a tree stand or a blind. You don't think anything of it. Like you're a bad hunter when you're young and don't know
Yeah.
anything, or if you're new. But if you're eager to learn, like obviously, it's just like anything. if we go play pickleball tomorrow, having never played, we're gonna be pretty bad. Versus, a year later,
Yeah,
we might have
most
the hang of
definitely.
it a little bit.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think I,
yeah,
new bad, just not as yeah. I don't know. There's I don't know what the term would be there, but there's obviously better hunters than others. So in that case, I think there has to be bad hunters.
yeah, and I mean, you can't be a good hunter if you weren't a
Right.
bad hunter first, you know? I mean, like with me growing up, I started bow hunting by myself when I was like 10 and, maybe even younger, and, you know, my dad would be like, "Make sure the wind's right and, do this and do this," and it's like so I had pretty good guidance, ever since I was a kid, but it's like still even then, I didn't know that I needed to have good access
Right.
to get to this stand. And, I didn't know I didn't need to blow the field out every night. Like, there's just things that like you have to learn that just take time, and there's certain things, I didn't know that the wind swirled in a bottom field and how
Right.
thermals worked. And, there's just things, I didn't know how deer
Why you were
moved. I
seeing
just
that
knew
buck.
that deer come to the field. Yeah, it's like I had no idea, and I think everybody has to be a bad hunter to be a good hunter for sure. But there's definitely ways you can make yourself a better hunter, and as long as you're willing to learn, you're gonna learn.
So, do you think? I think, in my personal opinion, the difference between like a bad or average hunter and a good hunter is pretty much just trial and error, time in the field. Like that's, I mean, you can listen to podcasts, you can watch YouTube hunts videos, you can read articles, but just learning in the field is going to separate you from, is going to get you to that good category. But I think past that, I think there's a level of great hunters that just have something. I think I would consider yourself one of them, and I'm curious if you see things that you do differently or a different mindset that you have versus like an everyday a good hunter that might kill a 140 every year, that type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you have your guys that are, you know, you have your blue collar guys that are gonna be able to hunt, one evening a week, and those guys aren't gonna care about the wind. They're just gonna go
As they
wherever they want
should,
to
yeah.
go, and
Yeah,
and I
as
don't
they
blame them.
should. If you can
I
get in
don't
the
blame them
woods, get in the
if I could.
woods.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. If I could only hunt one evening, like, am I still gonna hunt with the right wind? Yeah, but I'm gonna take advantage of every opportunity I have. So, like those guys may not be bad hunters, but they're still doing things wrong. And, I think, for me, like with the success that I've had, it's really just been because I've been smart, like I haven't been super, let's talk about being super aggressive. Like I haven't been super aggressive when I don't need to be super aggressive. And, I haven't ran deer out, and, I didn't blow a deer out of his bed. And, you know, I don't go, oh, I think this deer's bedding over here. I'm gonna go put a trail camera in there when the wind's at my back blowing into his bedding area, like things like that I think people overlook of, "Oh, I'm gonna go check this camera, close to his bedding area," and your wind's blowing into his bedding area and you run him out of there, you may never see
Right.
that deer again, Do you know where he was just bedded at? Yes. Is he ever gonna bed there
Right.
again? Probably not. So just simple things like that, just not hunting when it's 90 degrees and making a super aggressive move. Or, if I have a deer that's coming to a food source at 20 minutes after dark, and, I have to walk to get to my stand to leave, I have to walk the direction that buck would be coming, just simple things like that that I think people overlook. And, the biggest thing that I can do, especially with the way my neighbors are, is the least amount of pressure that's on my deer herd, the
Right.
better my farm
Especially
is.
with neighbors.
So just the more comfortable, yeah, the more comfortable they are on my ground, the better for me. So just doing everything I can to make sure those deer are comfortable.
Yeah, and basically, yeah, I would agree. The difference between good and great, almost anything really, is just the details. Before you do anything deer
Yeah,
related, you have to ask yourself, is this good for the goal I want to achieve? If you're hunting one specific buck and going to check a camera, check the wind, check your access, that type of thing. Is this good for the goal I want to achieve? Am I that needing of that camera card to where I'm willing to risk bumping this buck forever? Or am I wanting to hunt this buck because I think he's showing up on this camera and I need that intel? When is the right when that I can go in that, and how do I access it to not bump him? Just everything you do whitetail wise has to be, you have to ask yourself that question.
Yeah, most definitely. And, I'm going to do everything in my control to make myself as scent free as possible, as quiet as possible, have the best access that I can. I'm going to take a shower before I hunt and scent free soap. I'm going to make sure all my clothes are washed. I'm going to put just put my base layers on if I have to get in the truck. And, you know, are those things going to help me kill a deer? Maybe not, but the way I look at it is if I take a shower in scent free soap and, my clothes are washed and I'm as scent free as I can be, and I have a mature buck chase a doe downwind, and it gives me an extra two
Right.
seconds to kill that deer. That 2 seconds, I'm be the seconds I needed to be able to shoot that deer. So just doing everything I can to put myself in good positions and have everything in
Right.
my
Instead of
favor.
instant human smell, he could just, oh, what's that? Figure it out for 2 to 5 seconds, and that might give you a shot.
Yeah, I mean, he stops and throws his head up, and you know, smells up in the air, and you have time to kill him. To where if he hits your wind and he's gone,
Right.
you're screwed. It's the same with walking to your stand. You get a deer that smells where you walked in, and he hits your boot path and boom, he's gone. But if you have good access to your stand, and they don't have to cross where you walk, then you're just in a better position.
Yeah, I remember growing up, I was always just pissed off because we changed our clothes outside every morning because we didn't want to get all the house smells and cooking smells and, any candle smells, whatever that come in the house. You wash your clothes, you set them in a tote outside, and you change outside regardless of the temperature. That was always not fun at 4 a.m. But if it gives you that 2 to 5 seconds, that could be the difference. And those
Yes,
small details
exactly.
of doing little things like that add up to be huge differences. I remember, I
Yes.
remember watching a video that was put out on Lee Lukowski, and just seeing the level of detail that he's put into basically his empire, and being like, yeah, I
Yeah.
totally understand why he's successful every year, all the time, no question about it, because of all the, like, I was just seeing for the first time how much, you know it really took to get that level of success.
Yeah, and and he's a good example of being a great hunter. I mean, he started from nothing, and I think, there's a lot of people that don't know that because they just see
Expect
him
it
on
because he
social
does it every
media
year.
as this. Yeah, they're like, "Oh, Lee has money. I would do the same thing if I had money." And it's like, "No, you wouldn't. I promise." Like Lee does way more than you would, and he puts in way more work. He pays way more attention to
Even like
detail,
the planting side of things
and I
is
think a lot.
insane, the level of detail.
Yep, the food plot architecture, I'm gonna take a skid steer into this block of timber and I'm going to move, or I'm going to put a 2 acre food plot in the middle of this block of timber right here because I can sneak down this creek bank and I can hop in a tree right here. Things like that people just overlook and people don't understand. And, they just have this persona of, oh, if I had money like Lee, or if I hunted the same farms Lee did, I would kill the same amount of deer. And you wouldn't. There's people that obviously would, but, a majority of people would
Sure,
not.
and uh, obviously having money helps. You can buy a 1,000-acre farm in Iowa and have a better chance than if you're hunting middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, Michigan. But you still have to, those big deer are still mature and old and out to live. They're not just gonna walk in the stand wanting to die.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you still have to be smart. You still have to hunt with the right winds. There's just things that you still have to do no matter how big of a farm you have. It's almost worse when you have a bigger farm because, you can make more
You get
mistakes to where,
lazy.
you know, yeah, you can very easily get lazy.
Cool. I have another, I guess, kind of a two-sided thing. What would you say your biggest strength as a whitetail hunter is?
Oh boy. I mean, I would say my biggest strength as a whitetail hunter is just like understanding like deer movement and deer behavior and, being able to, look at a farm and, if I get permission to hunt a new farm, I can walk that farm and be like, oh, I can probably kill a deer out of that tree. There's a lot of people that, can't do that. And am I always right? Absolutely not. I could be like, oh, I can kill a deer out of that tree and, hunt that tree. And it's just an absolute gar hole. But, just understanding like where deer bed, how deer travel, how they get to their food sources, I would say is probably, my biggest strength.
And would you say you learned that mostly by hunting, just time and field? Did your dad help a bunch hunting with
I
your
would
brother?
say, yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely between just trial and error and just like understanding things like hunting by myself. But a large part of that was my dad. I mean, there's things I learned when I hunted by myself when I first started hunting. And, you know, I wanted to learn and I wanted to understand deer. So, I would see 7 deer do the same thing. And I would think, okay, why did those deer do that? Where are those deer coming from and where are they going? And just having that mindset, I think has really kind of just let me have the
I think you
success that
just
I've
kind of
had.
illustrated a separating point. You were asking the why question when you saw 7 deer move a certain way. You ask why, and then that leads to another puzzle piece figured out. Some people,
Yeah, exactly.
I've I do it a lot. Is just, oh, those deer are moving. I see 7 deer, that type of thing, and I'm not asking why. I'm not putting puzzle pieces together.
Yeah, and most people in that scenario are gonna say, "Oh, I've seen 7 deer over there. I guess I better go hunt over there," which a lot of times is the right call. But I don't want to just go hunt over there. I want to know why those deer are over there. I want to know where they're coming from, and I want to know where they're going. I want to know why they're doing it. And you know, are they betting on that side of the ridge because they can, see down into a bottom? Is it a south facing slope? Does the sun hit there? Is there more underbrush? So, is a buck going to be traveling the downwind side of that bedding area during November? Like just things like that that you just kind of pick up on the more you hunt. And, you know, I mean, I'm still super young,
Right.
guys like Lee know way more than I do and probably always will, but just having the mindset of wanting to learn and wanting to understand more, it really helps propel you.
Yeah, that's that the asking the why question, like you just when you were on that little rant there, like you put basically a whole how would I hunt these deer for the full season type thing. When you're asking why and you understand why, if you see deer moving a certain way early season, it could put a full picture of the entire how you're going to hunt that area during the rut. It could how you're going to hunt that area in late season, where you expect deer to move during the rut, during late season, what times of day, that type of thing. It just gives you a big picture.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm hunting a farm during early season and, a majority of the deer come out in a certain spot, like if I'm hunting public or like on a farm I don't know, like I'm like, okay, why are those deer entering the field there? Like, are they coming from bedding? Is it just easier access to get in there? Are they coming from the north? Are they coming from the south? Are they coming straight in there from where they're coming from? Just having that mindset, you can really learn a lot more by, just watching deer than you think you can.
Right. So, on the flip side of that, what would you say your biggest weakness as a whitetail hunter is?
Oh man. I mean, I would say my biggest weakness, sometimes, we talked about it earlier, I'm aggressive, but I'm smart, but I could also say that that's my biggest weakness. I mean, I can't really like give an example of a time that I was too aggressive, but that time will come. Like there'll be a time where I bump a deer and I never see him again. And, I make a crucial mistake and, but that's just like a chance I'm
Right.
willing to take. So, if I may go into an area and I may kill that deer and I may go into an area and I might run that deer out. And that's just a chance I'm willing to take. So that's probably my biggest weakness.
Yeah, I don't know though, because no matter what, if there's a mature buck, you have to take some gamble of some kind to kill that deer. You can't just let them alone the entire season just because you want them unpressured. At some point, hunting them will be a gamble. So at some point, you do have to gamble, but I definitely would agree that there's wrong times to pull that string.
Yeah, for sure, and there's times where you can't I could hunt a deer in his bedding area, or I could hunt a deer on his food source, and, I could play it safe and just strictly hunt his food source and probably eventually kill him, but he's got to survive the neighbors. He's got to make it through the rut. He's got to make it through gun season. So I'm willing to take the risk of sliding into that deer's bedding area during early November, trying to kill that deer versus playing it safe and being quote unquote conservative. And, then that deer gets
Right.
killed.
That saying out here in mountain hunting is like you don't leave elk to find elk. If you were planning on
Hmm.
hunting a deer late season, but you've got him patterned for late October, early November, you you should probably try to shoot him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I think I can kill a deer, I'm going to go kill him. I don't care what time of the
Even if
year
he's
it
shown
is.
up late season at that spot multiple years in a row, if he's super patternable at any given moment, you kind of got to take your chance.
Yeah, I mean, you can't pass up. I mean, I can't anyway. I can't pass up a daylighting buck.
You have 1 day to hunt the entire season. What are you picking? Knowing you, it's probably opening day of
Am
gun
I trying
season.
Am I trying to kill a specific deer or
Be in the
just the best
woods.
day of the year to hunt?
No expectations
Just be in the
whatsoever, just
woods?
ready for the show.
I'm going, mm, November 7.
And that's just because it's perfect rut.
Yeah, it's just based off of, I've killed deer on that day, and I've had great hunts on that day, and that's, like I don't know if that's just my favorite day to be in the woods. If you said you have one day you can hunt all year, that's just the day
Right.
it's gonna
I think
be.
it's I think it's just kind of that it's always that transition day or a couple of days where it's no longer pre-rut. It's kind of on.
Yeah, like, they're coming in the heat and, like, it's game on.
So, right now, this year, do you have any bucks? What is today? The October 23rd? Do you have any bucks looking,
Um,
searching, starting
yeah.
to hit scrapes really hard? What's the
I mean, I have deer that are hitting scrapes pretty hard, but, I don't there's no chasing or anything going on. I mean, there'll be a little bit of, kinda bumping around and, like that cornfield I hunted, there was some bumping around going on in there, but it's nothing serious. It's just a little scent check, and then they're back to feeding, so, it's just like it's not quite there yet. I am getting a lot of night activity on scrapes, but a lot of that's mainly due to the weather too. I mean, it's been pretty hot here, so there hasn't been a ton of daylight activity anyway outside of those few cold fronts that we have. But even those have only lasted a couple
and are you
days.
starting to see more new bucks show up at night, starting to move in?
Most definitely, yeah. I mean, seems like every morning when I wake up or every time I go pull a card, I got new cell cam pics of a new buck, or I got new bucks showing up on regular cameras. They're not big deer, but they're you know 2 and 3 year old deer that I haven't had on camera all year that are starting to show up and move around more. And some of them are bigger deer. I've had a few mature deer show up that are on the smaller end that I haven't seen yet. That I've had a few new deer show up that like I'd never seen in the summer, or I've never seen before. That's pretty standard for this time of year for
Right.
me.
And then when will you start rattling, calling, that type of thing?
Yeah, so I'll usually around like Halloween, I'll start to rattle and grunt. I'm not just gonna like blindly grunt on Halloween, or but like if I see a deer in a field, at 200 yards or whatever, or 100 yards, I'll call it that deer. But first week in November, I'll blind rattle and try to call in a deer.
And when it is peak rut, will you do blind rattling sequences?
I will,
And what
yeah.
kind of success have you had with
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I mean, if especially, mid-November, if you find a buck that's coming off his first doe and he doesn't have another doe and, you hit it with a blind rattle and he hears that deer's probably gonna come in. You know, so you have to get the right deer in the right scenario. If you have a deer that's with a doe, he's probably not gonna leave that doe, but if you find one that doesn't have a doe, you can probably call that deer in.
See, growing up, I wasn't as much of a believer in like rattling sequences, especially blind. But then the first year I tried it, I did a blind rattling sequence at like noon. I think it was like November 17th, and big 10 point, like 155-inch 10 point came in 10 minutes later looking to fight. Didn't get a shot on him. Next morning, did a blind rattling sequence at first daylight break. Big mature 8 came in 15, 20 yards. I was able to shoot him, but that was the first, I guess, eye-opening experience for me on blind rattling sequences. If it's peak rut, I think that's kind of the whitetail version of like an elk bugle. If you can get something fired up, looking to fight, and maybe 250 yards away from you, but you can't see it. He doesn't know anything's in your area. It can kind of connect that dot.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you find the right deer in the right scenario and you can rattle them in,
That's
that's
so
like
cool.
that's one of the most fun things you can do too. Yeah. Yeah. You just if you're hunting a bedding area, a lot of times they'll try to circle downwind of you and you can get busted fairly easily when you're rattling. I think a lot of people don't realize that. That's something that people overlook. Oh, I'll just rattle and someone will come in. But sometimes they'll come in downwind and circle around you like, they do if you have a decoy. And so it can be a hit or a miss thing. It's a bit of a
For sure,
risk,
and
but
that's why I
when it
hadn't got a
works,
shot at that
when it
10
works,
point that I rattled in that first day, because he came 150
yeah,
yards in the timber from my right, and he would not break that 150 yard marker because he heard exactly where it came from, and he was looking that way, but couldn't see anything. He went all the way around me back left. I don't know if he ended up smelling me or not. I'm sure he did, but that's why I ended up not shooting him, was because he worked quite literally a
yeah,
180-degree angle to get downwind of me instead of coming straight at me.
yeah. I mean, especially with mature deer. That's how they got big. They're
And that's
just
another
smart.
thing, is like, if you want to kill a mature buck anyway, but rattling too, it's going to be a gamble, because if they're smart and mature and not as turned on to the rut as they could be, they could come in and smell you and be gone forever.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think their senses are a little less heightened during November. If you blow one out in November, your chances of seeing him
Right.
again are a lot better than if it's the first week of October. But still, it's not something
So
you
if
want
you've
to do.
got a buck that you are a specific deer you're hunting, and it is November, and you expect him to be in the area, are you rattling, or you're confident enough in your skill level to put yourself where you need to be without?
I mean, I'll still rattle, but not. I won't do it much. Most of the time I'm hunting a funnel or, between bed and food, or I'm hunting the downwind side of the bedding area and, somewhere that deer is going to be that I can kill him. So like, will I rattle? Yeah, absolutely I will, but not, as much as if I'm just,
If you know
just
that buck's
hunting.
there, you certainly don't want to make him get downwind of you if you don't have to.
Yeah.
But it could
Yeah, for
it
sure.
could also go
Yeah.
the other way,
If I think I have a chance of killing them, I don't want to have any risk of that deer getting downwind
right?
of me.
And because you're not hunting unless you're confident in the pattern that you've got on that deer.
Yep.
Cool. So I believe that wraps us up a little bit. Um, Appreciate you coming on, sharing all your whitetail knowledge. Uh,
Yeah, for sure. My little knowledge that I
oh,
that I
definitely
possess.
more than me and probably the average listener. I know I mean, I like hearing from anyone that's kind of super good or an expert at their craft. And I would definitely consider you an expert at whitetail hunting. So certainly cool to pick your brain and understand how you think and how you approach things, which is certainly different than the way I've been doing it, and probably a few other people listening have been doing it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think you can learn something from anybody. I think you can learn stuff even from bad hunters, whether it be something not to do or something to do. I think you can learn a little bit from
Yeah,
everybody.
for sure. Well, I'll let you get to it. Appreciate you coming on, Blake. See ya.
Yep, you bet, man. Good talking to you.
Thank you for listening. You can find us on any social media platform, podcast platform, and YouTube. Hunt Vision or Hunt Vision Co. That's Hunt Vision CO. Bye.